The dust-laden wind carried Willow Turner's final prayer across the barren plains of Wyoming Territory, 1875. As her emaciated body collapsed against the wooden post she'd been tied to for 3 days. The hunger had become a living thing inside her, a beast gnawing at her insides with such ferocity that she could no longer distinguish between the pain of starvation and the raw wounds from the ropes binding her wrists. The outlaw gang that had ambushed the stagecoach, killed the other passengers, and taken her prisoner had finally grown bored with her presence. Leaving her to die seemed more amusing than putting a bullet in her head. Her crime had been simple. She had witnessed their faces during the robbery. For that, she was sentenced to a slow, torturous death in the unforgiving summer heat. Her lips were cracked beyond recognition, her once vibrant auburn hair now dull and matted against her scalp. The white cotton dress she wore hung like a shroud on her diminished frame. Consciousness came and went like the vultures circling overhead, patient predators waiting for her final breath. As darkness descended on the 3rd day, Willow's thoughts turned to her sister in Denver. She had been traveling to join her, to start a new life as a schoolteacher after the death of their parents. Now she would become just another victim of the lawless frontier, her body left to the elements, her dreams scattered with the prairie dust. The sound of approaching hoofbeats penetrated her delirium. Perhaps death himself had come to claim her, she thought, no longer afraid of the end. Through swollen eyelids, she made out the silhouette of a rider against the setting sun. The figure dismounted and approached cautiously, a rifle held steady. "Good Lord Almighty," a deep voice murmured. Rough hands, gentle in their purpose, reached for the knots binding her to the post. As her body slumped forward, strong arms caught her before she hit the ground. "Miss. Can you hear me?" The voice was clearer now, concern evident in every syllable. Willow tried to respond, but her parched throat produced only a faint rattle. The last thing she registered before losing consciousness was being lifted onto a horse, cradled against a solid chest that smelled of leather, tobacco, and safety. When consciousness returned, Willow found herself lying on a cot in a simple cabin. A cool cloth pressed against her forehead, and a kerosene lamp cast long shadows across rough-hewn walls. Beside her sat a man with weather-beaten features and kind eyes the color of a summer storm. "There you are," he said, his voice gentle. "Thought I might lose you for a while there." Willow attempted to speak, but her throat constricted painfully. "Don't try to talk just yet," he cautioned, reaching for a tin cup of water. "Small sips. Your body needs to remember how to accept nourishment." With infinite care, he slipped an arm behind her shoulders, raising her just enough to place the cup against her cracked lips. The water was cool and sweet, the most precious thing she had ever tasted. "My name's Kieran Nolan," he told her between sips. "Found you about 10 miles from my property." "Those bastards," he stopped himself. "We'll talk about that later. Right now, you just need to rest and get some strength back." Willow managed a nod before exhaustion claimed her again. Over the next few days, Kieran tended to her with a dedication that surprised even himself. A solitary cattle rancher who had settled in the territory 5 years earlier after the war, he had grown accustomed to his own company and that of his small herd. The sudden presence of a half-dead woman in his cabin had upended his quiet existence, but he found himself rising to the challenge with unexpected determination. Her recovery was agonizingly slow. The first day, she could only manage water and thin broth, which Kieran patiently fed her spoonful by spoonful. When she was strong enough to sit up, propped against his rolled-up jacket, he began to introduce small portions of stewed rabbit and softened johnny cake. "You need to eat," he encouraged when she turned away from the food, her stomach protesting after days of emptiness. "Just a little more, for me." Something in his earnest expression made her try again, opening her mouth to accept another small bite from his calloused hand. On the 4th day, her voice returned, raspy and uncertain. "Willow," she whispered when he asked her name. "Willow Turner." "Miss Turner," he acknowledged with a slight nod. Pleased to meet you, though I wish it had been under better circumstances. How did you find me?" She asked, the effort of speaking leaving her breathless. Kieran settled onto the three-legged stool beside her bed. "I was tracking a mountain lion that had been after my calves, saw the vultures circling and went to investigate." His jaw tightened. "Good thing I did." "Thank you," she said simply, unable to express the depth of her gratitude. "No need for thanks," he replied, suddenly uncomfortable with the emotion in her eyes. Any decent man would have done the same, but they both knew that wasn't necessarily true. The frontier was populated with as many scoundrels as saints, and Willow's current condition was evidence of that hard reality. As another week passed, Willow's strength gradually returned. She began to move around the cabin, first with Kieran's assistance and then on her own. The one-room structure was modest but meticulously maintained, with a stone fireplace, a small table with 2 chairs, and shelves lined with provisions and a few dog-eared books. To her surprise, Kieran was not just literate but well-read. In the evenings, as she sat wrapped in a quilt by the fire, he would sometimes read aloud from volumes of Emerson or Dickens, his deep voice giving new life to familiar words. "You're not what I expected," she admitted one evening. "And what did you expect from a Wyoming cattleman?" He asked, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Someone less." She searched for the word contemplative. He chuckled at that. "5 years alone with your thoughts will make a philosopher out of anyone, or a madman. Some days I'm not sure which I've become." "Definitely the former," Willow assured him, returning his smile. The easy companionship that developed between them surprised them both. Kieran had lived so long in solitude that he had forgotten the simple pleasure of conversation, of sharing meals with another person, of hearing laughter in his home. And Willow, still recovering from her ordeal, found unexpected comfort in this quiet man's presence. As her strength returned, Willow insisted on contributing to the household. She took over the cooking, making the most of the limited provisions. She mended Kieran's shirts and organized his haphazard storage system. Small changes that transformed the functional shelter into something more like a home. One morning, as Kieran returned from tending his cattle, he found her outside the cabin, attempting to establish a small vegetable garden in a patch of turned earth. "What are you doing?" he asked, dismounting and securing his horse. "Planning for the future," she replied without looking up from her work. "If I'm to stay here a while longer, we'll need more than jerky and beans." The casual mention of her extended stay caught him off guard. They hadn't discussed how long she would remain or what would happen once she was fully recovered. The idea that she might want to stay stirred something in him that he hadn't felt in years. "I reckon a few vegetables wouldn't hurt," he conceded, kneeling beside her to examine her work. "But this soil needs more than just hope to grow anything worthwhile." Together, they spent the day improving the garden plot, adding manure from the corral, and constructing a rudimentary irrigation system from the nearby creek. Their hands occasionally brushed as they worked, each touch sending an unexpected current through them both. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the prairie in gold and crimson, Willow finally spoke about the attack. "They killed everyone else," she said quietly. "The driver, an elderly couple, a salesman, shot them without hesitation. But their leader, a man with a scar from his eye to his chin, decided I might be useful to keep around." Kieran's hand tightened on his coffee cup, but he remained silent, letting her speak at her own pace. "When I fought back, he decided I wasn't worth the trouble. Said leaving me to die slowly would be more entertaining than a quick bullet." She shuddered at the memory. 3 days I was tied to that post. They left water just out of reach the first day, found that particularly amusing. Rage flared in Kieran's chest, hot and fierce. "These men have names," they called the leader Rattlesnake. "The others I only heard referred to as Pig and Crow." Kieran nodded grimly. "The Rattlesnake Gang, they've been terrorizing this territory for months. Sheriff in Laramie's got a bounty on them." "I need to tell him what happened," Willow realized. I could identify them. When you're stronger, Kieran promised. Laramie's a 4-day ride from here. You're not ready for that journey yet. Willow didn't argue, knowing he was right. Despite her improvement, she was still frail, her body nowhere near recovered from its ordeal. As days turned into weeks, the rhythm of their shared life became comfortable and familiar. Kieran taught Willow about ranch work, how to milk the single dairy cow, mend fences, and even basic skills with a revolver for protection. "You're a natural," he observed as she hit 3 cans in succession from the fence post. "Good eye." "I had a good teacher," she replied, lowering the gun and turning to find him watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. The air between them seemed to thicken. For a moment, Willow thought he might step forward, close the distance between them. Instead, he cleared his throat and turned away. "Best get back to those fences," he said, his voice rough. "Storm's coming." That night, the predicted storm unleashed its fury on the small cabin. Rain lashed at the windows and wind howled around the eaves. Willow started at a particularly loud crack of thunder, instinctively reaching for Kieran's hand across the table where they sat playing cards by lamplight. He didn't pull away. Instead, his fingers closed around hers, warm and reassuring. "Just thunder," he said softly. "Cabins stood through worse." "It's not the storm," she admitted. "Every loud noise, I keep thinking it's them, coming back," understanding dawned in his eyes. "You're safe here, Willow, I promise you that." The sincerity in his voice, the steady pressure of his hand on hers, eased something tight in her chest. For the first time since the attack, she truly believed she might be safe. The storm continued through the night, and when it was time to sleep, Willow found herself reluctant to be alone. Kieran, ever perceptive, settled into the rocking chair near her cot, rifle across his lap. "I'll keep watch," he said simply, waving away her protests. "Sleep now." In the dim light of the banked fire, Willow studied his profile, the strong jaw, the slight crook in his nose from some long-ago break, the way his hair curled at the nape of his neck. Something more than gratitude stirred within her, something that both thrilled and terrified her with its intensity. Morning brought clear skies and a strange new awareness between them. Their eyes met across the breakfast table, lingered a moment too long, then darted away. Their hands avoided touching as they passed the coffee pot. The easy companionship of previous weeks was now charged with an undercurrent neither was prepared to name. It was during this uncertain time that visitors arrived at the ranch. Kieran was the first to hear the approaching riders, his hand automatically reaching for the rifle propped by the door. "Stay inside," he told Willow, his expression grim. From the window, she watched as 3 men on horseback approached. They were dusty from the trail, but their clothes marked them as lawmen, not outlaws. Still, her heart hammered against her ribs as she recalled the last time strangers had appeared in her life. Kieran stepped onto the porch, rifle visible but not raised. "Afternoon, gentlemen. Something I can help you with." The lead rider, a stocky man with a gray streaked beard and a sheriff's badge, touched the brim of his hat. "Sheriff William Douglas from Laramie. These are my deputies. Looking for information about a stagecoach robbery 3 weeks back. Trail led us in this direction." Kieran's posture relaxed slightly. "You might want to come inside then. I have someone you should talk to." Willow steeled herself as the men entered the cabin, keeping close to Kieran's side. When the sheriff removed his hat, his eyes widened in surprise. "Madam," he acknowledged. "Didn't expect to find a lady out here." Kieran's hand found the small of her back, a subtle gesture of support. "This is Miss Willow Turner. She was on that stagecoach you're asking about." For the next hour, Willow recounted her ordeal to the increasingly grim-faced lawman. She described each member of the gang in detail, the location where she'd been left to die, and the approximate direction the men had headed afterward. "You're lucky to be alive, Miss Turner," Sheriff Douglas said when she finished. "And fortunate Mr. Nolan found you when he did." "I know," she replied, her eyes meeting Kieran's across the room. The rattlesnake gang has been a plague on this territory for too long, the sheriff continued. With your testimony, we might finally bring them to justice. Would you be willing to come to Laramie when we apprehend them? Your identification would be crucial for a conviction. Before Willow could answer, Kieran spoke up. She'll come if needed, Sheriff, but I'll be accompanying her. The protective note in his voice sent a warm current through Willow's veins. Yes, she agreed. I'll testify. After the lawman departed, promising to send word when the gang was captured, a heavy silence filled the cabin. The reminder of the outside world had disrupted their insulated existence, bringing reality crashing back. You'll be wanting to continue to Denver soon, Kieran said finally, his back to her as he stared out the window. Your sister must be worried sick. Willow felt a pang of guilt. In the weeks of her recovery, thoughts of her original destination had receded, replaced by the immediate concerns of healing and the growing attachment to the man who had saved her. Yes, she acknowledged, though the word felt hollow in her mouth. I should write to her at least, let her know I'm alive. Kieran nodded, still not looking at her. Next supply run to town, we can post a letter. That evening, by lamplight, Willow penned a long letter to her sister, explaining her delay and assuring her of her well-being. What she didn't write was how her heart now felt divided between her duty to family and the unexpected feelings blossoming for the quiet rancher, who had become her savior, her protector, her friend. As spring transitioned to summer, life on the ranch settled into a pleasant routine. Willow's letter was sent, and a reply eventually arrived, expressing profound relief and understanding about her delayed arrival. The garden flourished under their joint care, providing fresh vegetables that improved their formerly simple meals. The wanted posters for the rattlesnake gang were refreshed with new details Willow had provided, but no word came of captures or sightings. It was during the heat of July, as they worked side by side branding new calves, that everything changed. Kieran, normally sure-footed, slipped in the mud of the corral and fell hard against the fence post. The sound of his arm breaking was audible even over the lowing of the cattle. Willow's medical knowledge was limited, but necessity made her resourceful. She helped him back to the cabin, fashioned a splint from pieces of wood and bound his arm as best she could. Might need to ride for the doctor, Kieran grunted through clenched teeth, his face pale with pain. Not until tomorrow, Willow insisted, wiping sweat from his brow. You're in no condition to travel tonight, and I won't leave you alone. That night, as fever set in from the trauma of the injury, Kieran's usual stoic facade crumbled. In his delirium, words poured from him that he had kept carefully contained for weeks. Don't go, he murmured as she pressed a cool cloth to his forehead. Please don't leave for Denver, Willow's hands stilled. Kieran? I know I have no right to ask, he continued, his eyes glassy with fever. What can I offer a woman like you, a hard-scrabble existence in a one-room cabin? You deserve more. Her throat tightened with emotion. What if this is exactly what I want? His fevered gaze found hers desperate and vulnerable. I never thought I'd want anyone in my life again. Then you came and everything changed, the thought of this place without you in it. He shook his head, wincing at the movement. I can't bear it, Willow. Tears welled in her eyes as she pressed her lips to his burning forehead. Then don't think about it. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. Whether he registered her words through his fever, she couldn't be sure. But she meant them with every fiber of her being. By morning, the fever had broken. Kieran was weak but lucid, his eyes following Willow as she prepared for the ride to town. You remember much of last night? She asked, checking the cinch on his horse's saddle. A flush that had nothing to do with fever colored his cheeks. Enough, he admitted, enough to know I made a fool of myself. Willow approached the bed where he lay, her expression serious. You spoke from the heart, there's no foolishness in that. Before he could respond, she leaned down and pressed a gentle kiss to his lips. It was brief but unmistakable in its meaning. We'll talk more when I return, she promised, her eyes bright with emotion. Rest now. The ride to town was long but gave Willow time to sort through her tangled feelings. She had come west, seeking a new beginning, and fate had provided one just not in the way she had anticipated. The schoolteacher position in Denver had been her plan, but plans could change. Life had already shown her how quickly circumstances could turn. The town doctor, a gruff but competent man named Hawkins, agreed to return with her to the ranch. On the journey back, he regaled her with local gossip, including news that a member of the Rattlesnake Gang had been captured near Cheyenne. "Turned on his companions, from what I hear," Dr. Hawkins said as they rode. "Told authorities where to find the others in exchange for leniency." Willow's pulse quickened. "Have they been apprehended?" "Not yet, but it's just a matter of time. Territory's too hot for them now." He gave her a curious look. "You have some interest in this gang." "More than some," she replied grimly and explained her connection. The doctor's eyebrows rose higher with each detail of her ordeal. "And Nolan found you, nursed you back to health." He shook his head in amazement. Never would have expected it of him. Man's been a hermit since he arrived in these parts. Barely speaks 2 words when he comes to town for supplies. "He's different when you know him," Willow defended, then blushed at the knowing look the doctor gave her. "I'll bet he is," Dr. Hawkins chuckled. "Well, good for him, and for you, it seems." When they arrived back at the ranch, Willow was alarmed to find the cabin door ajar. Drawing the pistol Kieran had taught her to use, she approached cautiously. "Kieran," she called, heart pounding. The sight that greeted her inside turned her blood to ice. Kieran lay on the floor, blood seeping from a wound on his temple. Standing over him was a tall man with a scar running from his left eye to his chin, the leader of the Rattlesnake Gang. "Well, look who it is," Rattlesnake drawled, turning his cold gaze on Willow. "The girl who wouldn't die. Thought I recognized this place when we were passing through. Decided to pay a visit, see if my suspicions were correct." Dr. Hawkins had followed her inside and now stood frozen in the doorway. "Good Lord," he muttered. "Drop the gun, girl," Rattlesnake ordered, his own weapon pointed at Kieran's unconscious form. "Or I finish what I started with your protector here." Willow's hand trembled, but her resolve was iron. This man had already taken so much from her, the other passengers, her sense of security, nearly her life. She would not let him take Kieran too. "Where are your friends?" she asked, stalling for time, trying to assess the situation. "Gone. Scattered after that fool pig got himself caught." His smile was cold. "Just me now, looking for a fresh start, but I can't leave witnesses behind, especially not ones who have been talking to the law." In that moment, several things happened at once. Dr. Hawkins, showing unexpected courage, lunged forward. Rattlesnake swung his gun toward the doctor. And Willow, with the clarity that comes in moments of extreme danger, remembered Kieran's lessons about shooting steady hand, deep breath, squeeze, don't pull. The sound of her pistol firing was deafening in the small cabin. Rattlesnake staggered backward, a look of surprise crossing his features as he clutched his chest. His own shot went wild, splintering wood from the ceiling. He collapsed heavily, his gun clattering to the floor. Dr. Hawkins was on his knees beside Kieran in an instant, checking his pulse. "He's alive. Head wounds superficial, probably just knocked him out." Relief flooded Willow as she kept her gun trained on the outlaw. "Is he?" She nodded toward Rattlesnake. The doctor moved to check. "Dead," he confirmed grimly. "Clean shot through the heart." Willow lowered her weapon, a curious numbness spreading through her limbs. "I've never killed anyone before." "You did what you had to do," the doctor assured her, returning to Kieran. "You saved 3 lives today, his, mine, and your own. Now help me get him onto the bed so I can tend to both of you properly." The aftermath passed in a blur. Dr. Hawkins treated Kieran's head wound and properly set his broken arm. He gave Willow a mild sedative when he noticed her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Neighbors from a distant ranch, having heard the gunshot while passing by, helped remove Rattlesnake's body and promised to notify the sheriff. It was nearly sunset when Kieran finally regained consciousness. Willow was beside him instantly, her face etched with worry. What happened? He asked groggily, wincing as he tried to sit up. "Lie still," she urged, gently pressing him back against the pillows. "Rattlesnake found us, he's gone now, everything's all right," understanding dawned in his eyes. "You," she nodded, not trusting her voice. His good hand found hers, squeezing tightly. "I'm sorry you had to do that." "I'm not," she replied with surprising firmness. "He would have killed you, both of us." Kieran's gaze held hers, full of emotions too complex for words. "Before all this happened, I was about to tell you something important." "I remember," she said softly. "You asked me not to leave, and you said you wouldn't." "I meant it, Kieran." Her voice was steady now, certain. "Denver was just a place, a job. But this what we've built here, what we could build together, this is a life." A smile spread across his face, transforming his features despite the bandage around his head. "Willow Turner, are you proposing to me?" A startled laugh escaped her. "I suppose I am, rather forward of me." "Forward suits you," he replied, tugging her closer. "Yes is my answer, in case you were wondering." Their lips met in a kiss that held all the promise of their future together, tender at first, then deepening with the passion they had both restrained for too long. From the doorway, Dr. Hawkins cleared his throat. "I see my patient is recovering nicely," he observed dryly. "I'll just be on my way then. Change those bandages tomorrow, Miss Turner, and Nolan, no strenuous activity for at least 2 weeks." They barely registered his departure, too absorbed in each other and the miracle of their survival. In the days that followed, as news spread of Rattlesnake's demise, visitors came to offer thanks and congratulations. Sheriff Douglas himself arrived to take Willow's statement and inform them that the remaining gang members had been captured, ending their reign of terror over the territory. "You've done this community a great service, Miss Turner," the sheriff told her. "There's a substantial reward being offered. It's yours by right." The money came at a fortuitous time. With Kieran's injury limiting his ability to work, they used it to hire temporary help for the ranch and to expand the cabin, adding a proper bedroom and enlarging the main living area. They were married that autumn, a simple ceremony performed by the circuit preacher with their newfound neighbors in attendance. Willow wore a dress of blue calico with wildflowers in her hair. Kieran, his arm finally healed, stood tall in his best shirt, his eyes never leaving her face as they spoke their vows. "From the moment I found you," he told her later that night as they lay together in their new bed, "something inside me knew. Even when you were too weak to stand, there was a strength in you that called to me." Willow traced the lines of his face with gentle fingers. "You saved my life by finding me, by feeding me when I couldn't move, but you saved my soul by loving me, by giving me a home when I was lost." "We saved each other," he corrected, pulling her closer. "And we'll keep on doing that every day for the rest of our lives." As winter settled over the Wyoming prairie, the Nolan Ranch stood as a beacon of warmth and hope in the vast landscape. Inside the expanded cabin, where once there had been solitude, there was now love, laughter, and the promise of a future neither Kieran nor Willow could have imagined before fate brought them together on that dusty plain. Their story, which had begun in cruelty and desperation, had transformed into one of resilience and devotion, proof that even in the harshest wilderness, love could take root and flourish, nourishing two souls who had found in each other exactly what they needed to heal and grow.